I found out I wasn't invited to my parents' 40th wedding anniversary when my cousin sent me a picture of the invitation. A gold-foiled, custom-embossed card with elegant cursive lettering, except my name wasn't on it. The list was short. Close family only, it read, which apparently didn't include the daughter who'd been paying their mortgage and credit card debt for the past 6 years. I stared at the photo on my phone for a long time. I wish I could say I was shocked, but it was just one more log on the fire. A slow burn that had started the day I came home from college and realized I'd been reduced from daughter to debt solution. Growing up, I was the easy child, the one who didn't ask for much. My brother Derek, on the other hand, was the star, the golden child. He wrecked 2 cars before 21, never paid a single dime back. Mom said, "He's just figuring things out." When I bought my first used Honda with my own money, she called it modest and safe. That was code for unremarkable. When Dad lost his job and their retirement plan went up in smoke, I was already working full-time. I offered to help temporarily. That was 11 years ago. I automated bill payments, sent monthly transfers, and handled their medical expenses. They thanked me, sure, in polite, business-like ways. But love? That had always felt like something I had to earn. And somehow, I always came up short. Last Thanksgiving, the first showed up with homemade pies and wine. My mom opened the door and said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd actually come." I laughed it off. I always did. That night, I overheard her telling my aunt that Derek was the only one who still feels like family. Derek hadn't visited in months, but he had a wife, 2 kids, and apparently that counted more than bills and loyalty. When I confronted her, she blinked like I'd slapped her. "Why are you making this about you?" she said. "It's a family celebration, not a pity party." I stopped calling after that, stopped checking in, stopped paying for the little things they never noticed: subscriptions, apps, pharmacy fees. But the mortgage? I left that alone. I wasn't ready to be the villain. Not yet. Then came the anniversary. A 40th anniversary party at a 5-star hotel. Champagne wall, string quartet, seafood tower. Mom's dream. I found the hotel's name through the catering tag in a shared Facebook post. It was all booked in her name, but paid via a card under mine. One I'd set up years ago to help them manage emergencies. They had maxed it out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat at my kitchen table in a house I bought alone and felt something colder than rage take root. I wasn't invited, but I was expected to pay. Again, silently, invisibly. I called the hotel the next morning. "Hi, this is Rachel Wexler. I need to cancel the event booked under Jeanette Wexler's name." The card used was mine and I'm the account holder. They hesitated, then confirmed it was cancelable, no penalty. The hotel manager asked if I'd like to rebook the space, and that's when I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to host something else that day. The day of the family-only celebration." My parents showed up dressed to the nines. But instead of a banquet room filled with flowers and cousins, they found a modest brunch event, with my name on the welcome sign. My table had place cards for the people who mattered: my godmother, a few friends, and my therapist. I wasn't trying to humiliate them. I was just done pretending I didn't see what was always there. They asked the front desk where their party was. The manager told them it had been canceled. They tried calling me. I let it ring. My cousin said my mom burst into tears in the lobby. That Dad just sat there, staring at his shoes. They called me selfish, said I'd embarrassed them. But they never asked why. They never even said sorry. I didn't want revenge, not at first. But that moment, that silence, that absence of power, I'd never felt more at peace. They used me until I disappeared into usefulness. I stopped being their daughter and became a utility. Now, finally, I was something else. Gone. They haven't spoken to me since. Derek called once to mediate. I told him to send the next mortgage payment himself. He hung up. Sometimes I stare at that invitation photo, the one without my name. It was the best gift they ever gave me, because it freed me. They called me selfish for leaving, but I finally feel like I can breathe, and that's enough. The silence was blissful at first. After the canceled party fiasco, I let everything go dark. No calls, no emails. I even deleted our old group chat thread. For a while, I let myself believe they might just disappear from my life, like a bad dream. That maybe, somehow, they'd realize what they did and feel the weight of it. But that's not how people like my family operate. It started 2 weeks later. A voicemail from my mom, her voice drenched in shaky, fragile sweetness. "Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to see how you're doing. We were surprised you didn't come to the party. It wasn't personal. Maybe we can talk soon?" She sounded like someone who had watched a glass vase fall and still swore they didn't push it. Then came Dad. His tone was less apologetic, more stern. "Rachel, this is getting out of hand. You can't just cancel things without talking to us. That was a very important day for your mother. We had family flying in, was inconsiderate. I didn't respond. So they tried guilt. My aunt texted me a blurry photo of my mom looking tired and pale. Your mom hasn't been sleeping since the party," she wrote. "This is tearing the family apart." What family? The one I wasn't invited to? Then the calls got more frequent. I blocked the numbers. They used new ones. Unknown numbers, spoofed area codes. My voicemail filled up daily. They weren't just trying to guilt me now, they were trying to pull me back in. And when guilt didn't work, they pivoted. "Rachel, it was just a party," my mother said in one message. "Don't be dramatic. You know how sensitive you've always been." Sensitive. That word again. The same one she used when I cried at my brother's graduation because they skipped mine the year before. The one she whispered when I brought up how I always paid the bills. But Derek always got the credit. Sensitive, as in unreasonable, hysterical, easily dismissed. Derek got involved again. This time with that smug big brother energy I'd hated since childhood. "Look," he messaged me, "they're old. They're gonna die someday. And you'll regret acting like this. You're not a victim, Rachel. You're just pissed. No one gave you a gold star." I laughed out loud reading that. Because in a way, he wasn't wrong. I was pissed. Not about gold stars, but about being used, disrespected, and erased. Like I was some errand girl who overstayed her welcome. That week, I logged into the shared credit card account I'd once set up for emergencies. It was maxed out again. Amazon purchases, spa treatments, even a deposit for a cruise. I hadn't used that card in a year, yet I was still the one tied to it. I called the bank and closed the account. Then I called the utility companies for their house, the same ones I'd been quietly covering on autopay since 2017, and removed my payment method. The next morning, I got a frantic text from Mom. "Why is the water off?" Dad said the electric's out too. "Please call me, we're scared." I didn't respond. That night, I got a long email, 5 paragraphs of emotional blackmail disguised as concern. They said they were worried about my mental health, that I was lashing out in self-destructive ways, that they forgave me for what I did at the hotel, forgave me for stopping them from spending money they didn't earn, using a card they didn't own, to throw a party I wasn't invited to. I started taking screenshots. Every email, every text, every call log. I didn't know what I was collecting it all for yet, but I knew better than to trust their sudden concern. I'd learned the hard way that toxic people don't change. They just change tactics. I even got a letter in the mail, handwritten. That was a new one. Inside was a card with roses on it and a note from my mom. "I don't know what I did to deserve this. You've always been the difficult one, but we never gave up on you. Please don't give up on us." They never gave up on me. The same people who threw a family celebration and didn't invite their only daughter? It wasn't an apology. It was a performance, carefully crafted to make them look like the loving, wounded parents and me, the bitter, unstable black sheep. And the worst part? They believed it. They had convinced themselves so thoroughly of their own fiction that any deviation from it looked like betrayal. I blocked their numbers again, changed my email, changed the locks. I had a camera system installed around my house, and then it got worse. I came home one evening to find my mailbox open and a pile of ripped envelopes scattered on the lawn. Bills, packages, letters tampered with. I checked the footage. My mother, wearing sunglasses and a scarf like she was someone from a bad soap opera. I filed a report with the post office and changed my delivery address. That same night, Derek called from an unknown number and left a voice message that still lives rent-free in my head. "You're ruining this family, Rachel. You've always needed to feel special. Well, congrats, you got your attention. Just know, you'll You'll regret this when Mom's gone." That was the moment something snapped inside me. This wasn't guilt anymore. This wasn't sadness. This was war. One made a list. Not of revenge plans yet, but of every single way I'd supported them over the past decade. Every payment, every signed document, every favor, every birthday where I showed up, even when they made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. I went into my file cabinet and pulled out the old power of attorney forms Mom made me sign years ago, just in case something ever happened, she said. She never understood that I kept a copy too, and that, legally, those forms had implications she never accounted for. Because now, I wasn't just the bitter daughter with a bruised ego. I was the woman who had the receipts. And I was done being polite about it. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after Derek's voicemail. Not because I was hurt. I'd bled those wounds dry long ago, but because something inside me finally settled. Something sharp and precise. Like when a blurry lens clicks into focus. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't sensitive. I was being manipulated, lied to, and exploited over and over again. And now, I was done playing daughter to people who only saw me as a wallet with a pulse. So I started digging. I combed through my old emails, financial statements, even texts from years back, anything that might help me map out just how far this had gone. I didn't realize how deep the rot ran until I laid it all out. Not just the payments, but the lies. Like the time Mom said her insurance didn't cover her dental work, so I paid the $3.200 bill. Turns out, she had a reimbursement check sitting in her drawer the entire time. Or when Dad claimed they were behind on utilities because of a bank error. The truth? They'd spent $600 at a casino that weekend. I had the bank statement. I had all of it. It was grotesque. And it was intentional. They hadn't just accepted my help, they'd expected it. Built their lifestyle around it. And when I started pulling away, they didn't reflect. They retaliated. I started a spreadsheet titled Evidence of Exploitation, complete with dates, amounts, and receipts. It looked like a forensic audit, because it was. But I wasn't just collecting data anymore, I needed a witness. Someone who remembered the Rachel before all of this. Someone who hadn't already swallowed the family Kool-Aid. That's when Melissa called. Melissa was my cousin on my dad's side, technically. She was a year older, lived 2 states away, and we hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. But she'd always been different. Quiet. Observant. A little bit of an outcast herself. She messaged me out of the blue, "Hey, this is random, but I saw what happened with the party. That was messed up. I've been meaning to reach out for a while." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Then we talked. For hours. Turns out she'd pulled away from the family too, just quieter about it. Her mom, my Aunt Carol, had told everyone that I stole the anniversary booking out of spite. Melissa never bought it. She knew how this family worked. Her words, "They're addicted to control and allergic to accountability." She told me something else too. At the party that wasn't, someone had been overheard saying the whole thing was paid for by some inheritance Mom scraped together. What inheritance? Melissa didn't know more than that, but something about it gnawed at me. My maternal grandmother passed 5 years ago. We weren't close, but I remember visiting her after her stroke. I also remember very clearly Mom saying there was no estate, just enough for funeral costs, she told me. But I'd handled those funeral costs, paid for them myself, which begged the question, what happened to Grandma's actual estate? I requested a copy of the probate records. It took a week. What I found made my jaw go slack. My grandmother had left behind a small inheritance. Not a fortune, roughly $78,000, but enough. It had been split 3 ways, my mom, my uncle, and me. Except I never saw a dime. Mom had claimed I waived my portion using a signed letter with my name at the bottom. Only, I never signed that letter. The signature was a scan, forged. I remember once, years ago, emailing her a blank signature image for some insurance paperwork. She must have saved it, used it, lied about it. I showed it to Melissa. She was quiet for a long time. "You could take this to a lawyer," she said. "I will," I replied. But revenge isn't always courtroom drama and slamming fists on mahogany desks. Sometimes it's slower, smarter, more surgical. I called the family lawyer, technically my grandmother's old estate attorney. I asked a few strategic questions. Nothing direct, just enough to rattle the cage. Then I filed a formal fraud complaint with the state. Quietly, legally, methodically. I also froze any joint accounts and notified the credit bureaus to place alerts on my identity. Mom wouldn't find out until her next attempt to apply for a Target credit card, a tiny crack in her perfect mask. In the meantime, I worked with Melissa to quietly unravel more threads. Like the fact that my parents had been bragging to the extended family about their early retirement plan, funded, apparently, by a real estate payout. You know what real estate they sold? My name was still on the deed. It was a rental property I had invested in with them a decade ago, me providing 80% of the funding. They'd quietly refinanced it, pulled cash out, and sold it without informing me. They never filed to remove my name. Legally, I was still part owner, and they were in violation. I didn't yell. I didn't text. I didn't even confront them. I hired a real estate attorney. The lawsuit was drafted within a week. I sat with the printed document in my hands for a full hour. Melissa sat across from me, quiet and calm. She knew what this meant. "You're going nuclear," she said. "I'm just reclaiming what's mine." Because here's the truth. They never taught me growing up. Love doesn't mean silence. Family doesn't mean servitude. And being a good daughter doesn't mean being a doormat. They built a house of lies. I was just opening the windows. The first formal letter from the attorney went out on a Monday. That Friday, Mom called 11 times. I didn't pick up because the storm was coming, and this time, I was the one holding the thunder. There's something eerily quiet about the moment before a storm breaks. No yelling, no slammed doors, just a stillness that tastes like metal on your tongue. That's how it felt when I sent the final packet. A thick, legally notarized document. Copies to both of my parents, the probate court, the real estate board, and their bank. Inside, a summary of financial fraud, property misappropriation, forgery, and a civil lawsuit demanding restitution. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Unforgiving, meticulous, undeniable facts. I didn't hear anything for 3 days. Then Mom showed up at my door. She looked smaller, older, like life had started folding her in on itself. She held a Tupperware container of lemon bars, the kind she used to make when she wanted something. I watched through the peephole as she stood there for 5 full minutes, breathing hard, eyes flicking left to right, like someone watching for an ambush. I didn't open the door. She knocked. Once, twice. Then again, softer. Then she said my name. "Rachel, I didn't mean to hurt you. Funny. How long does it take someone to say that? 1 year? 10? Maybe only when they realize you've hired legal counsel. I just wanted things to be simple," she said. "You always made things harder." I sat on the other side of the door, hands still, heart cold, because there it was again, the twist of blame, the refusal to own it, the way she turned even her apology into another accusation. Then came the knock from Derek, not literally, but figuratively, in the form of a cease and desist from his attorney. Apparently, he decided I was threatening family stability and making unsubstantiated financial claims. The letter was fluff, bluster, a weak attempt at intimidation dressed in legal jargon. My attorney laughed when he read it. Then he sent back a 5-page response. That's when the real fireworks started. I don't know what conversation happened behind the scenes between Mom, Dad, and Derek, but it must have been ugly, because suddenly my parents flipped. From cold silence to full-on panic. Voicemails, emails, even a handwritten letter from my father, his first in my adult life. He begged me not to go through with the lawsuit, said it would destroy the family's name, that it would ruin your mother. Ruin her? She ruined me for years, one silent cut at a time, slicing my sense of worth until I bled invisibility. She excluded me from her wedding anniversary while spending my money. She forged my name, lied about my inheritance, sold my property, called me unstable when I stopped complying. And now she wanted mercy? I didn't respond. Instead, I escalated. The utilities they'd lost from my payments? Still off. Melissa helped me dig deeper and found out they'd been using my name to set up fallback accounts. I reported identity fraud to the credit bureaus. Their accounts were frozen within 48 hours. I filed an official motion with the probate court to re-examine the grandmother's estate. With Melissa's help and a handwriting analyst, we confirmed the signature was a scan. They tried to deny it, then tried to settle. I refused. They offered $15,000, then $25,000, then $40,000. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle, the same principle they never extended to me. The same respect they offered to Derek by default and denied me out of habit. The final straw came when I received a letter delivered via their new lawyer. Inside was an apology from my mom and dad, a full-page, typed document explaining how they made mistakes, but never stopped loving me. They also asked me to withdraw all legal action to preserve what's left of our relationship. I read it once, then again. Then I tossed it in the fireplace. Because you can't preserve what never existed. The court date for the real estate claim arrived fast. They didn't even show. The judge issued a default judgment in my favor. I was awarded full compensation for my initial investment, plus damages. Total payout? Over $110,000. That same week, their house, the one I'd been covering for years, was hit with a foreclosure notice. I wasn't listed on the loan anymore. They'd refinanced without me. Spent it all. The bank wanted it back. I watched from a parked car as they carried boxes out of the garage. Mom clutched her rose-covered china set like it was sacred. Dad's face was red, soaked with a bitterness I used to mistake for disappointment in me. Derek wasn't there. They didn't see me. But I saw them. For the first time, really saw them. Not as my parents. Not as people I owed anything to. But as broken adults who mistook sacrifice for servitude and love for leverage. That night, I got the last message I'd ever received from my mother. It wasn't long. You were always good with numbers. I hope you're happy counting what you destroyed. I didn't reply. Because she was right. I am good with numbers, like how many years I spent sacrificing, how many thousands of dollars they burned through, how many chances I gave them, how many times I left their house feeling smaller than when I arrived. And now, zero. Zero ties. Zero guilt. Zero weight on my shoulders. The final piece came a week later, when a distant cousin posted about the fallout in a family group thread. People were taking sides. Some called me cruel. Others whispered that maybe mom and dad deserved it. Melissa stood up for me publicly, fiercely. Then she sent me a message. They're spinning it like you overreacted. I told them maybe she did. But maybe it was 10 years too late. I smiled. Because that's the thing about storms. They don't destroy you. They reveal what was already rotting. The house is quiet now. Not the eerie silence of before the silence. After a slammed door or a choked back sob. This one is gentler. It hums. It breathes. I wake up and hear birds, not buzzing phones. I walk past my mailbox and don't feel dread. I cook dinner without flinching at every notification, every phantom ring. It took months to get here. I won the lawsuits. I reclaimed what was mine. I even donated part of the settlement to a local women's legal fund quietly, anonymously. Not because I wanted to be the bigger person, just because I didn't want to carry anything that came from them anymore. Not even the money. They moved in with Derek. At least that's what I heard. He never reached out again. Not even when they lost the house. Not when I refused to negotiate the final court orders. I imagine that house is tense now. 3 people who each think they're victims. Circling the drain, bitter and breathless. I thought revenge would feel louder, like fire, like thunder. But it doesn't. It feels like an empty chair that no longer needs to be filled. Like finally realizing the door you kept trying to open leads nowhere and choosing to walk away instead. There are moments that still hurt, little ones. Like driving past the old bakery mom and I used to go to when I was a teenager. Back when things were simpler. Or maybe I just hadn't realized yet that love in our family was transactional. I remember one afternoon I was 16. She forgot to pick me up from school. I waited in the cold for 2 hours. When she finally showed, she didn't apologize. She handed me a cookie from that bakery and said, "Don't be dramatic." I took the cookie. That was the first time I learned how easy it is to accept crumbs when you're starving for affection. But I'm not starving anymore. I eat what I make. I buy my own flowers. I light candles when I want to. There's no one here to tell me I'm too much, or too cold, or too ambitious, or too sensitive. I'm just me, without conditions, without debt. Melissa and I talk weekly now, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything. She comes to visit when she can, and we've started joking about doing a podcast together, surviving the family tree, or something equally absurd. It feels good to laugh about things we used to cry over, and I finally went back to therapy. Not the kind where you try to fix yourself to be more lovable, the kind where you realize you were never broken to begin with. My therapist asked me what closure looked like for me. I told her, it's not a finish line. It's just not needing their permission to exist anymore. I've stopped checking for new messages. There haven't been any in weeks. I assume they're still mad. Still rewriting the story to paint themselves in pastel shades and me in blood red strokes. Let them. That version of me, the angry one, the ungrateful one, the villain, they can have her. Because that person doesn't live here anymore. The real me? She's somewhere quieter, somewhere safer. She's picking out new paint for the living room, planning a solo trip to Maine, learning to sleep through the night without dreams of family dinners, turned interrogation chambers. Every now and then, a thought sneaks in, what if they reach out again? What if someone gets sick? What if they try to pull me back? I already know the answer. I won't go. Because I don't owe anyone a seat at my table just because we share blood. Especially not the people who only remembered I existed when the bills were due. They called me selfish for leaving, but I finally feel like I can breathe. And that's enough. Story 2. For a year, I covered my sister's rent. Then I discovered that she had forgotten to notify me about her house purchase. I noticed it as I was en route to get groceries. I nearly didn't pause. It was one of those things that you just happen to notice. In a quiet neighborhood, a lovely small house had a large sold sign pinned into its grass. However, I saw something. The vehicle in the driveway. My sister's vehicle. I halted, blinking in bewilderment. I knew it was Megan's car, since it had a dent on the side from when she backed into a pole last year. Why was she parked here, though? At first, I assumed she could be going to see a buddy. She could have been house-sitting. It was illogical. She was struggling to make ends meet. Every time rent was due and she didn't have the money. She told me that. I had been paying her rent for the last year because of this, working additional hours and making ends meet in order to support her. With my heart pounding more quickly, I pulled over. Megan laughed as she carried a pair of keys out the front door. I gazed at the keys. She wasn't coming to visit. This is where she resided. She shook hands with the real estate agent next to her, who said something I couldn't hear. As if she had won the lotto, Megan was grinning. I felt strangely light, as if I were not actually there. I exited my vehicle and made my way over to her. My legs are moving automatically. She looked up, spotted me, and the smile froze on her face. Emily, hello. She spoke too loudly, too intelligent. I paused in front of her and gazed at the keys she was holding. You purchased a home? She paused for a half second. Just long enough for her eyes to flare with shame. She hurriedly shoved the keys into her pocket and added, I was going to tell you, as if that might cause them to vanish. Everything happened really quickly. Everything happened really quickly. The words sounded like static in my mind. For the last year, I had been paying her rent and straining to pay my own obligations, believing she was barely surviving. She was also saving for a home over this entire period. I was surprised at how piercing my voice sounded. You said you didn't have any money. Megan chuckled nervously. Well, I didn't. I was working on setting up my future, making wise decisions, but not for rent. Clever movements. With a knot in my gut, I repeated. While she invested all of her money in a down payment, she gave me the impression that she was broke. I put in extra hours at work. I reduced my personal expenditures. I lived in a small flat with used furnishings instead of taking holidays. Furthermore, she would never struggle and would never lose her position. Megan paused her smile. I understand your frustration, but it's not as if you gave me cash. Did you assist with the rent? Yes, but I didn't ask you to. I blinked. What? He gave a shrug. Yes, I did mention that I was short on cash, but I didn't imply that you had to pay. You just succeeded. You gave the impression that you were having difficulty. which made my jaw clench, as if there were no other options. She shifted her weight and responded, "Well, yeah, I was not wealthy for everything. I needed to set priorities. It just made logical since you were in a more secure position." My chest felt more secure and constricted. "I hardly had enough to cover my own costs, Megan. I worked overtime. I thought you needed aid, so I skipped things I wanted to do." Her voice became guarded, and her face darkened a little. "You weren't really sending me money. All you did was pay my rent. Furthermore, I wasn't squandering money. I was making a serious investment, something tangible." I looked at her incredulously. "So, let me clarify this." My voice was dangerously quiet as I said, "While you invested your money in a home, you allowed me to cover your rent. And you believe it's acceptable now that you have it?" She let out a sigh as if my response had worn her out. "After you chose the furnishings following the housewarming celebration, Emily, I was about to inform you when I interrupted." She gave an eye roll. "I anticipated your reaction." I shook my head and released a breath. "You knew it was wrong. Therefore, you knew I would be upset." She didn't respond. I only needed to know that. I walked back towards my car after turning around. "Come on, Emily, stop acting like way." I was called after by her. I continued, "Look, I'll make things right if you're angry. You are welcome to attend. Feel free to stay here at any time. Even the guest room is yours to utilize." Before she could continue, I jumped into my car and slammed the door. My hands trembled as I drove away, not only out of rage, but also out of shame. They had put me in. I had been fighting to make ends meet for a year, believing that I was keeping my sister afloat and that she never required my assistance. I tightened my hold on the wheel and clenched my teeth. She didn't even feel guilty about letting me make sacrifices for her. I didn't immediately return home. I gripped the wheel so firmly that my knuckles hurt as I drove around for over an hour. I couldn't sit quietly because I was so furious. I'm too restless to be alone myself thinking. I could feel the fire rising in my chest each time I mentally reenacted the exchange. I had been duped by Megan. While she saved enough money for a house, she had given me the impression that she was having financial difficulties. What's the worst? She had no guilt at all. In fact, she made an effort to make me feel foolish for becoming angry. There was a pattern. There has always been a trend. I simply hadn't allowed myself to see it. Megan was always the one getting away with things when I was growing up. I was the trustworthy and accountable one, the one who didn't cause issues. I took action because I had to. I was supposed to aid Megan if she needed it, and I was being self-centered if I ever complained. It was something Mom used to say all the time. "Just assist your sister, Emily. You're older than her. Don't worry about it so much, Emily. She admires you. You're quite fortunate to be so self-sufficient, Emily. All Megan needs is a bit more assistance." I stopped doubting it at one point. It was simply the way it was. It was up to me to take responsibility, maintain operations, act as the binding agent that kept everything together. It was Megan's turn to make errors, have second chances, and always be forgiven. Similar to when Mom took money out of my savings account. I had been saving for a new bike for months when we were youngsters. I was thrilled to have something of my own at last, and I counted the money every night. Then half of it vanished one day. He hardly responded when I informed my mother. "Did you steal your sister's money, Megan?" Megan had given a shrug. That was the end of it. I needed it. Nothing, no apology, no penalty. Mom simply turned to me and told me not to worry, Emily. It's only financial. You can regain it. I recall looking at her, perplexed. Why did the fact that it was mine make it less important? The person who took it was Megan. However, it was me who was ordered to go on. Again and again it happened. I was meant to take care of things when Megan made mistakes. For example, when she was found cheating on an exam while we were adolescents, rather than enduring the repercussions. She pleaded with me to assist. "I'm not as clever as you. For me, just take my retake. They won't even pay attention." "No," I said. She sobbed. Mom became interested. "Why don't you just assist your sister, Emily? Surely you don't want her to fail?" Megan didn't learn anything, but she also didn't flunk. Why would she? Someone repaired it for her each time she made a mistake, and I was nearly always the one. I foolishly believed that as we grew older, things would change, that she would mature and assume personal accountability. Don't expect me to take care of everything for her. I was mistaken because I was a mature woman who had recently struggled for a whole year to pay my sister's rent while she saved money for a house, and she didn't even have the grace to feel guilty about it. I clenched my jaw and pressed down harder on the throttle pedal. I could hear Megan's voice in my mind. Yes, I did mention that I was short on cash, but I didn't imply that you had to pay. You acted as though I was at blame, as if I had deceived myself into thinking she required assistance. However, she had permitted me. She urged it. As long as I was prepared to offer, she had no trouble taking and taking and taking. I felt like screaming. Rather, I parked in my little apartment block, drove home and sat in the dark, gazing at the dashboard. I reflected on the several occasions I had assured myself that Megan would act morally, that she would change, and that this time would be different. I was determined not to make the same mistakes again, since I had been incorrect every time. I refused to ever allow her to do this to me again. Since my family would notice and not support me if I cut her off, I simply didn't know how to end it. They didn't. In my mind, I could already hear my mother's voice. Megan had no malicious intent. All she wanted was to advance. Emily is your sister. Family members support one another. Where was my assistance, though? I used to work extra hours and forego meals in order to stretch my paychecks. The night I stayed up, worried how I was going to continue paying other people's expenses. So where was my assistance? I suspected I already knew the solution. Nobody had ever been as concerned about me as they were about Megan. Perhaps it was time for me to stop caring about her as well. The following morning, I awoke with a pit in my stomach and a headache. The rage had not been subdued by sleep. It was worse, if anything, because I wasn't simply angry with Megan anymore after spending the night mentally reliving every incident. I was angry with myself. I had allowed this to occur. As usual, I had let Megan to control me, exploit me, and walk all over me. And I understood why. Because our family often made me feel awful for defending myself when Megan did anything self-serving. And it would be the same this time. I knew I should simply leave her alone and go on. However, I was unable to. Not quite yet. I had something to say. I needed her to hear exactly what she had done to me and to look me in the eyes. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. Her voice was far too casual as she responded on the third ring. You might enjoy it, sis. Less than 24 hours had passed since she had fully betrayed me. Small chat didn't worry me. Are you at home? She paused. Yes. Why? Excellent. I'll be over. Pause, then cautiously. Emily, please let's chat later. I had already reached for my keys. No, I will arrive in 15 minutes. She let out a sigh. All right, I ended the call. I wasn't going to give her time to think of another reason, an additional twist to make it seem like I was at fault. After 10 minutes, I arrived at her house, not the small flat where I had been making payments. I parked and inhaled deeply as I tried to control the rage that was building within of me. This time, I refused to let her shame me, gaslight me, or drive me insane. Before I even knocked, she opened the door. Look, do I understand your anger? However, I shoved past her and entered the home. I'm completely insane, Megan. She crossed her arms and shut the door. You're going overboard. I genuinely laughed. While you were saving for a home, you allowed me to cover your rent for a year. And now you're telling me I'm overreacting when you're standing in that house? Megan let out a loud sigh, as if she was already tired of this discussion. Emily, I didn't make you pay. You made an offer. I tightened my jaw. Since you told lies, you gave the impression that you were having difficulty. You claimed to be broke. You gave me time to reflect. Losing your flat was just one step away. Additionally, you were only using me to help you save money for a house during that entire period. She shrugged after a brief moment of her countenance changing. What the heck? Well, did it not work? It was as if someone had hit me in the gut. Are you serious? Megan sighed in frustration. You act as though I took from you, Emily. I didn't. You were able to pay the rent. I have money saved up for the future. At my own price, I gazed at her. She raised her hands in the air. God, you pretend to be impoverished. You're all right. You're employed. You're not a homeless person. Why you're making such a huge deal out of this is beyond me. To stop myself from shouting, I had to inhale deeply. In order for her to save money, I had worked myself to the bone. She was also behaving as like it didn't matter, as if I were unimportant. Something broke inside of me. I have never encountered a more self-centered individual than you. Megan even rolled her eyes at my icy tone of voice. Correct. Since I desired to establish a life for myself, I'm selfish because of it. No, because you deceived me and allowed me to give up everything for you. Because you are self-centered. Since you were hoarding money while I was struggling, you don't even feel a little bad about it. He laughed and shook her head. You're quite theatrical. I turned to go. She stated it at that point. You know, if he weren't constantly so resentful, you'd be happier. I went cold. Bitter? This is what she believed. I hadn't been used, though. She hadn't done anything wrong. I was just resentful, as if I was just upset that she had something that I didn't. Something evil curled in my chest as I turned it back. Megan, I'm sad for you. She blinked. What? Since you only know how to take, you can never truly be happy. Nothing is built by you. Nothing is earned by you. You simply keep taking from those who genuinely care about you, and there won't be anyone left to borrow from in the future. She truly appeared uneasy for the first time. Either way, Emily, I left. I had finished justifying myself to her. I'm done being drained by her. You're beyond being the only one who gave a damn. However, I ought to have realized it wasn't finished. Not with my folks. Because they started chasing me as soon as I interrupted Megan. My mother phoned the following day. I let the voicemail go. She then texted her mother, Emily, give me a call. We must speak. I choose to disregard it. My father called 2 hours later, then Megan once more. I had 8 missed calls before the end of the day. When Mom phoned again, I eventually gave up and answered. Emily? She let out a sigh. Why are you treating your sister so badly? I almost dropped the phone. Cruel? She explained what had transpired. As if I had kicked a dog rather than confronting a liar, Mom added, she is inconsolable. It wasn't hilarious, but I did laugh. Oh, she is inconsolable. It's odd since I was rather upset to learn that I had paid her rent for a year while she saved money for a down payment on a home. Emily. With a hint of disappointment in her voice, Mom remarked, Megan required assistance. You have always been the one in charge. You should have helped her until she was able to stand on her own. I closed my eyes tightly. She wasn't having any trouble, Mom. She was telling lies. Mom responded strongly that she was doing what she had to do. She currently has a home. Isn't that advantageous? I tightened my jaw, not after she tricked me to get it. A lengthy pause ensued. Next. You're usually so obstinate, you know. Mom sighed. It's impossible for you to simply let things go. I tightened my jaw. I don't allow people walk all over me, is that right? Emily is your sister. Family members support one another. I breathed out slowly. How about me? Mom paused. What? When did you think Megan would assist me? Now my voice was hushed. When was the last time she helped me? Quiet. Then don't be tough, Emily. I shut my eyes. Nothing was going to change. The issue wasn't just Megan. The issue was with my entire family. And I had at last finished my part in it. I didn't answer my mother. I sat there looking at the blank screen after hanging up the phone. I felt as though something had finally broken inside of me. Not in an explosive, irate manner. Don't shout. Don't chuck anything. Nothing but quiet. A lifeless weight in my chest, quiet and weighty. I was no longer angry. I was unharmed. I had just finished. In my life, for the first time, I had a clear view. For years, I had thought that I was a member of this family, that I was important, and that they considered me to be more than the person who cleaned up after Megan's missteps. However, they didn't. I was beneficial to them. That was all. And they were turning on me now that I was no longer helpful. After shoving my phone into a drawer and setting it to quiet, I walked out of my flat. At first, I had no idea where I was heading. All I had to do was move. Their voices trying to draw me back in were drowning me in my thoughts, and I needed to go somewhere else. An hour later, I was drinking a cup of coffee that I wasn't even sure I wanted in a cafe on the opposite side of town. I gazed out the window and observed folks going about their daily lives. Ordinary, uncomplicated, and unaffected by the type of fatigue I had. My phone then began to vibrate. I ought not to have looked at it. I was aware of that. However, I did. My dad sent me a note. Dad? I really believe that you should apologize to your sister Emily. You're being unjust, and she's genuinely furious. Injustice? In fact, I burst out laughing. The elderly woman at the adjacent table gave me an unkind look as I made a sharp, bitter sound. I had been deceived, used, and drained by Megan, and I was the one who was unjust. With my mouth gritted, I stuffed my phone back into my bag. They had no intention of stopping. They would not allow me to abandon my duty. I was forced to produce them. I discovered more missed calls and messages when I got up the following morning. I didn't respond. Then there was a knock on my door. Before I ever glanced at it, I knew it would be. Megan was standing there when I opened it, looking worn out as if she hadn't slept. When she saw me, her face wavered as if she was anticipating a softer, more amenable person who was prepared to make amends. I only gazed. She let out a sigh. "Emily, may I enter?" I folded my arms. "Why?" She shook her head and gave a little giggle. "Whoa, all right." Still, he shoved past me. "Normal." I turned to her and shut the door. "What are you looking for?" She frowned as though she had never actually seen my flat before, most likely because she didn't. Unless she was in need of anything, Megan never bothered to come see me. She exhaled deeply. "However, I understand your anger. I believe you don't see my point of view, but I do." It nearly made me chuckle. "On your side?" She gave a nod. Crossed arms. I had to act in my own best interests. "It's not illegal. Emily, you've always been steady. You've always done a decent job and had a good head. I knew you would be all right." I simply gazed at her. She used that as an excuse, that I was overly accountable. So it was acceptable to utilize me since I was okay, I inquired. She gave an eye roll. "I didn't pick you, my God." I arched an eyebrow. She paused. "All right, I might allow you to assist me. However, family does that. We support one another. No, Megan." With a calm voice, I said, "I assisted you. I never got any aid from you." She blinked. I moved in closer. "Tell me once. You gave up something for me once in our entire lives." Quiet. She made an uncomfortable change. "Emily, hurry up." "No, say it." She turned her head away. "I'm not sure. You never had to keep track of things like that, so I never did." Her jaw tensed as I spoke. "You're behaving as though I did anything illegal. I just took the best course of action. And I'm acting in my own best interests." My voice said, "Cool." She scowled. "What does that signify?" "It indicates that I'm finished." She squinted. "What's finished?" "Alongside you. With the expectations of this family. As your safety net. I'm finished." Megan genuinely chuckled. "No, you're not." I didn't grin. "For the first time I am." Her eyes flashed with real alarm. "Don't be silly, Emily. You're simply angry. You'll move past it." I gave a head shake. "Not now." She exhaled in frustration. "He's all right. What are you looking for? Do you want me to reimburse you?" I gazed at her. "The money is not with you." She paused. The mortgage is beyond your means, isn't it?" I tilted my head in question. She winced. That was it. She was here for that reason. It was more than guilt. My parents weren't the only ones pressuring her to make things right. She had come here in the hopes that I would help her out because she was having trouble. "Didn't you spend everything?" I said. He took a swallow. I let out a slow breath. "Megan, I hope it was worthwhile, considering that you will need to solve it yourself." She laughed. "So you don't mind if I lose my house now?" I looked her in the eye. "It matters to me that you ultimately face the repercussions of your own decisions." She gave a head shake. "You're really chilly." "No," I answered plainly. "I'm just taking care of myself at last." She made a small line with her lips. When she saw something in my expression that she couldn't control, she opened her mouth as if she wanted to continue the argument, and she realized she had lost for the first time. She gave a quick breath. "All right, in any case." Grasping the doorknob, she turned and headed to the door. She paused. "You know," she said without looking back, "you underestimate your strength. You'll return." I grinned. I responded, "No, Megan, I won't." She left. I locked the door after closing it. Then I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time as I stood there in the silence. There is peace. I had made a decision for myself for the first time in my life, and I had no intention of turning back. Story 3. My brother was given the firm by my parents after they retired, claiming that women aren't suited for leadership roles. I backed off, grinning. I took someone out to supper 3 months later. My brother's wine glass fell. My mother broke down in tears. It was the type of meal when everything appeared to be flawless. The table appeared to be arranged for Mom's special occasion at first sight. China. Under the chandelier, the wine cups gleamed. It appeared as though a mold had been used to form the mashed potatoes. My father had shaved. I arrived with a visitor, and my brother wore a blazer. You'd think I'd brought a unicorn home, guy. My mother's eyes glowed as if she had just experienced divine intervention as soon as we entered. She air-kissed both my cheeks and pretended that she hadn't spent the previous 10 years telling me that I was married to my job. Well, look at you, she remarked. My father nodded briefly. Brought someone around at last. How I grinned. Unspoken, yet the presumptions come in like mist. Later, Emily, the cousin who usually wore pearls and questioned why I didn't soften my appearance, whispered, "Is he your boyfriend?" Across the table, "He is really well groomed." I grinned once more. That kind of thing. They all sipped their wine, laughed, and made a mental note of the wedding date. My brother and I never agreed. Halfway through dinner, Thomas lifted his glass and delivered the same statement he usually made when he thought the spotlight wasn't shining brightly enough. Something about preserving the family name, history, and sacrifice. It was his time to take the helm of the business, which had been in our family for 3 generations. He expressed gratitude for our parents' faith in him, expressed gratitude to the visitors for their faith in him, praised God for providing him with the courage to face this challenge. He didn't even glance at me or thank me. Beside me, I poured myself more wine. My visitors were quite silent, kind, and perceptive, the lone person not acting at the table. They had no intention of making this supper the most memorable of their lives. I learned 3 months ago that they had given Thomas ownership of the business, the voting stock, the title, and the authority. They handed my father everything after we worked side by side for 15 years, handling operations, logistics, and clearing up Thomas's mess. They also gave me a faint grin. "Here, you'll always be welcome." Something like an extra chair or a couch cushion. They put me down like they were breaking in the living room. A faithful pet receives sad news. It's not that you lack the ability. "I'm afraid I'm going to faint," my mother replied, grabbing for my hand. "Women simply aren't made to handle this type of strain. We didn't want to cause you any trouble. Your sibling has that leadership instinct," my father continued. "He makes decisions. In other words, he makes educated predictions and hopes for the best." I inquired as to their sincerity, like he was signing a peace pact. My dad nodded. "You'll be a great support system behind every great man," my mother stated. She drifted off as if it were meant to be consoling. I grinned. I went home after that and got to work organizing things. My mother looked at me knowingly as she leaned in to eat supper again. She nodded at my guest and said, "He's very handsome. Does he work in finance? Now that your brother is in charge, it's probably time to start considering your own next course of action. You could still be able to have children." I blinked. "A household?" She smiled. "I take it you've always desired children?" I hadn't, specifically, but it seems that my desires weren't important. In picture ops, Thomas was laughing as usual with 2 of the board members who had come for the complimentary steak. One of them inquired about the experience of being the man of the hour. He smiled. Since I was a young child, I had been getting ready for this. I always had the instincts for it, according to Dad. Instincts? Correct. Such is the tendency to hold me accountable for failing to meet quarterly targets. I took a slow sip of my wine after playing golf all quarter long and referring to it as networking. They were all grinning, content with their illusions, and congratulating themselves on their wise decision. As though he had personally carved Thomas out of oak and ambition, Dad leaned back in his chair and watched him with pride. They would assume, but they didn't know what I had brought or who I had brought. The air was heavy with self-satisfaction. By the time dessert arrived, the company logo was piped in gold icing on the 3-tiered monstrosity cake. When they pulled it out, my mother actually gave a clap. She raised her glass and said, "Thomas, you've truly made us proud." I cocked my head. Indeed, this room is filled with pride. Thomas smiled at me as if I was finally catching up. "I am aware that it is not what you anticipated. The slightest smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as he spoke. However, you will adore what we have in store for you. For someone with people skills, marketing is ideal. I looked him in the eye. Correct. Because color schemes and slogans are the best ways to express vision. He thought I was kidding, and he laughed. He was laughed at by all except the man seated beside me. I looked at the faces I had known my entire life around the table. My parents are smug and content. My brother is soaking up compliments like gravy and a sponge. Uncles and aunts raising a glass to the next generation. And, as expected, I, the obedient daughter, grinned politely. If only they were aware that they knew the true identity of the man standing next to me. If they were aware of what I had verified and discovered in those documents, individually, for 3 long months. I'd imagined this night 100 different ways. The silence, the gasps, the outrage, the shattered version of the perfect family portrait they'd spent years trying to frame. They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out. And when they did, nothing, absolutely nothing would ever be the same again. When I was 6, I told my parents I wanted to take karate. My dad blinked at me like I just told him I wanted to join the Navy. He glanced at my mom, then laughed. You mean ballet, sweetheart? I didn't, but I ended up in ballet anyway. Pink tutu slippers. The whole thing. I cried after every class. They said I was being difficult, dramatic. Eventually, I stopped crying and just went quiet. When I was 8, my brother got a remote-controlled car. I got a tea set. When I was 10, he acquired a tool set. I received a baking kit. When I was 12, I told my dad I wanted to operate a firm like him one day. He looked up from his newspaper and remarked, "That's wonderful, but you'll have your hands full with kids by then." My mom smiled like it was a praise. "You'll make a great wife." I recall nodding, smiling back. Then I went to my room, locked the door, and cried till I fell asleep. That was the year I wished I was a guy. Charlie desired it like. Close my eyes and make it happen. Kinda wish, I thought maybe then they'd see me. Listen to me. Be proud of me. I was the courteous one instead. The assistant. The person who cleared away the mess. The one that didn't occupy a lot of room. My sibling. He was a born leader. This meant that he was constantly correct, noisy, and dirty in our home. But he wasn't. I stopped requesting things by the time I was a teenager. No more karate. No more business books. Just ballet, baking, and timely smiles. When Thomas once shown a like for space, they purchased a telescope for him. After I won a maths competition, I received a journal. A journal. You see, they don't have futures, they have sentiments. I kept thinking that people may notice me if I put forth more effort. So I went to work, did some studying, I had excellent marks. When things broke, they were silently fixed. My dad was worried out at 14, so I stayed up late organizing his home office. He was hardly aware. Thomas spilt coffee on a spreadsheet, but he was commended for trying. At 15, I took first place in a regional debating tournament. My mother asked whether I would think about becoming a teacher. She stated, "It's such a nurturing job." After arguing with a server about a salad, Thomas was referred to as aggressive. Even so, I persuaded myself. Perhaps I was insufficient. Perhaps if I grinned more, if I didn't correct them, perhaps. Perhaps they would eventually remark, "You're good at this," if I performed my duty more effectively. They didn't. Around my senior year of high school, things began to change. Kayla was a buddy of mine. Astute. It's funny, audacious. Her father had a modest company. Her mother worked as an engineer. Kayla participated in football, practiced martial arts or whatever else she desired. When she expressed her desire to manage her own business, her parents applauded. One day, purchased her Christmas business cards. I observed that the first time I visited her home, saw the potential differences. It was almost too good to be true. I recall having this weird heavy sensation in my chest as I walked home that evening. Not melancholy, not rage. Just a realization. I wasn't being held back by my gender. Who are my parents? I was hearing their voices in my brain now. The ones who encouraged me to be quiet, to shrink, to make things easy for other people. I thus stopped listening. Piece by piece, not everything at once. I first joined the school's business club in secret. Then, while my parents believed I was preparing for my impending wedding, I proudly began saving money, looking into programs, and reading case studies at night. They were still blind to it, or perhaps they didn't want to. As valedictorian, I delivered a speech during graduation. Later, my dad told me, "That was very beautiful. You have to compose a piece for your brother's next gathering." I enrolled in every leadership program I could find while in college, majoring in business. I learned how things actually worked, networked, and interned. When I returned home for breaks, I nodded and smiled, letting them believe that I was only assisting with office tasks. They never inquired about my true activities. I was never asked what I wanted. My brother informed everyone that I was interested in administrative tasks, such as spreadsheets. I remained silent because, deep down, I still believed that they may change their minds if I continued to show them. At last, they may remark, "I'm ready." Perhaps they will see me at last. Then came the day that a family meeting was called. The living room was where we were all sitting. There are cookies on the table, chilling champagne. The atmosphere felt rather stiff. They informed us of their retirement at that point, that Hamas was prepared to inherit the business. Only him. Nor shared leadership, nor a collaboration. Not even a polite reference to me. Give him a kiss. As if it were the most obvious decision ever. My father stated it. He fits right in. My mother gave a nod. Helping has always come naturally to you. You will continue to be involved, my love. They assured me that I would always have a place and gave me a bonus check. Somewhere in the break room, like a stool. This time, I didn't protest or weep. I said thank you with a smile. Something subtle and profound changed within me as I left that chamber, like if I hadn't simply been wiped once more. I no longer felt invisible. I was satisfied. I discovered something odd a few days later when going over some handover files. A folder that was out of place. A document that was not consistent. I initially believed it to be just another error made by Thomas. However, it became worse the more I looked. I saw things that I shouldn't have seen and that nobody had warned me about. Things that might alter everything if they were true. I refrained from screaming. I didn't barge into someone's workplace. I snapped a photo. I then called a few people. Give them the impression that I left. Let them think I agreed to it, because they would soon realize something they had not anticipated. They shoved the girl away. She had had enough of waiting to be chosen. My brother was in the middle of another anecdote about how he ruined a client agreement and then saved the brand's reputation. When Mark's briefcase opened, he produced a thin folder. No drama, quietly, as if it were a menu, simply slide it onto the table. I choose not to look at it. I didn't have to. In the radiance of their idyllic evening, my parents continued to sip wine. They referred to it as the celebration of legacy. It seems that leaving the family firm to the least responsible individual in the room was part of the legacy. I raised my glass to Thomas and to strong leadership. My mother replied. I grinned as I touched my glass on hers. Strong is a good way to describe it. As though clearing his throat before dessert, Mark spoke gently. I have something to share. Everyone pivoted. Thomas narrowed his eyes. Hold on. Again. Who are you? Mark extended his hand. The whole table fell silent as forensic accountant Mark Delaney spoke. My father blinked. What are you? Mark remained courteous. I was employed to look into the company's financial issues internally. The table became motionless. Thomas laughed aloud. Compelled. Isn't this a joke? At last, I said something. Not at all. Unless you include your bookkeeping, there is no punchline. After opening the folder, Mark gave 2 copies to my mom and dad. The third was grabbed by Thomas. He initially skimmed the pages as if they were unfinished homework. Then he froze. My mom leaned forward to read over his shoulder. She stopped smiling. My dad glanced at the figures. His expression didn't alter at first, but his knuckles became white where they held the tablecloth. Mark's voice was calm. These reports include proof of illicit withdrawals, forged vendor bills, and transfers into personal accounts. Some of those monies came straight from the firm. Others, he glanced at my parents, originated in your retirement account? My mom let out a gasp. Thomas got to his feet. There was nothing that I stole. My father's tone was piercing. Take a seat. A child who had just been taken to the principal's office was liked by Thomas. You claim to have given up gambling, my mother said. Her voice broke. Yes, I did. I had everything under control, for the most part. You stole our retirement funds? With a quiet voice, my father asked. That wasn't the case. I intended to repair it. How? I inquired. Using Monopoly money or magic? Red-faced Thomas turned to face me. You were not entitled. This person was taken to supper by you. This could not have been addressed in secret. I said I could have. However, I wanted everyone to witness the consequences of giving someone authority simply because they were born with the proper plumbing. My father got up. We were ambushed by you. Oh, I apologize, I said. As I have been doing for the past 20 years, was I meant to wait for you to call on me? The yelling began. I had embarrassed the family, according to my mother. According to my dad, I purposefully blindsided them. Thomas attempted to pretend that the victim had claimed that I had deceived them, claimed that my main concern was retaliation. I was interested in the business. I mentioned the legacy, the clientele, and the staff. You have a serious obsession. You need to have approached us first, my mother said. And what? I inquired. Received a piece of cake and a pat on the head. I wouldn't have been believed by you. You never do. It was not denied by them. It stung more than I thought it would. Dessert was served, but nobody touched anything. Professionally, Mark excused himself. Not a drama. Simply left me there in the debris after leaving via the front door. My father looked around the table. The party is ended. Everyone is out. The dining room was deserted in 5 minutes. I see the bright side. Smudged glasses. Cake unaltered. There was no longer any family celebration. Thomas barged out of the rear. Don't apologize. No justification. With her face in her hands, my mother sat at the table. As if it had answers, my dad gazed to the ceiling. Me. I sat calmly, while I watched them come to terms with what I had always known. They would wager on the incorrect child. Nobody spoke the morning after the meal, nor a message, nor a call. My door was not knocked on. Nothing but quiet. After everything, you'd think someone would get in touch. To shout, perhaps. To weep, perhaps. Perhaps to express gratitude for preventing the company's demise. However, no, nothing. My mother left me a voicemail 3 days later. She spoke in a soothing tone, the quiet that signals an impending explosion. The legal team has been consulted. I've made the decision to file charges with your father. She made no specific reference to Thomas. We're taking the necessary action. With my heart pounding, I listened while holding my phone in my lap and experiencing an odd sensation. I hope. For once, it seemed like they were seeing my brother clearly, which is why I didn't want to see him in jail. The allegations were short-lived, specifically 2 weeks. Then there was another voicemail. It was quieter this time. Sadder. We've decided against it. He remains our son. He has consented to treatment. He will receive assistance. No recognition, no apologies. Another subdued reminder that there will always be another opportunity for him. I wasn't asked what I thought. They didn't seek assistance. They did, however, request a copy of the whole report from Mark. One had already read it from beginning to end. They were curious about the true severity of the situation. The solution? It's bad enough. Nearly $500,000 had been spent by Thomas. Some from corporate accounts and the remainder from the retirement fund he was meant to assist in overseeing. He had been entrusted with my parents' future. He used it to wager on sports and play poker online. However, I continued to be the issue in some way. A few days later, I ran into my mother at the grocery store, but she didn't greet me. She only glanced at me before turning her head away. I waited for a minute in the hopes that she would say anything. He didn't. So I continued to walk. Thomas attended counseling. That's what they said anyhow. He found employment elsewhere. Junior supervisor at a friend's business, allegedly to aid with his reconstruction. He was also mandated to repay all of the money. Every single dime. Not to me, to my parents. They did not wish to damage the company's reputation. They so decided to resolve the matter amicably, tidy up the mess, put the headlines aside. Someone on the board told me that he was fortunate, something he could have done real time if I had put more effort into it. I hadn't pushed because I was tired of wasting energy on people who never noticed me, not because I felt sorry for him. Weeks went by. The group continued to stand, a little dazed. The next twist then appeared. My dad gave me a call. He didn't greet me. Just, we must discuss the business. I said very little. Simply wait. He finally spoke what I had always hoped to hear. However, it fell flat somehow. You were correct. We ought to have seen it sooner. For years you were keeping this place together. I didn't express gratitude to him. Rather, I inquired, "Now what?" A pause occurred. He cleared his throat after that. "We're considering inviting someone in. A CEO with experience? An outsider." I blinked. "Really? We simply believe it would be easier since it would be too difficult to give to your daughter. That's not the point, is it?" Once more, he was silent. That was my response. I typed out my resignation that evening. No drama, no justification. A brief email. 15 years later, I was done. I anticipated greater pain. He didn't. After holding my breath for years, it was actually like letting out a breath. I refrained from crying. I didn't think twice. I simply poured myself a drink of wine and shut down the laptop. I began working at a new job 2 months later. High-level plan. More pay and more hours. No glass ceiling that looms over me like a dangling chandelier. The CEO asked me why I had left the family firm during the interview. I grinned. "For family reasons?" she chuckled. "Everyone has those. Neither of my parents called. Thomas most certainly didn't. However, I didn't need them to. I wasn't trying to get their approval for the first time in my life. I had no intention of waiting to be chosen. I had no intention of proving anything. I was simply going about my life. Lastly, without requesting consent. I sometimes ponder what would have transpired if I had been selected first. If they had had the same faith in me as they had in him. If I had been given the keys rather than the crumbs. Then I recall, their crown is not necessary for me. I constructed my own. He set it on fire after they handed him everything. I got nothing from them. I still got up though, not to exact retribution, not to be commended, just because I was able to. And it's okay if it makes me the antagonist in their view of events. I'm living mine at last, at least. Get more articles like this by subscribing. And whether you've ever been the one who gets ignored, how did you make it better?